Good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle, and we have breaking news tonight. The Washington Post is now reporting that former FBI Director Andrew McCabe has been fired. Yes, the embattled former FBI director is, we know what happened with him. We know that his wife obviously was running for state representative, got help from Terry McAuliffe. Of course, his PAC donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to her campaign. It was not revealed at the time, and that raised a huge problem. And he's been embattled now for, several months. A lot of us thought he would have been fired a long time ago. Remember, his pension, he would have kicked in his pension on Sunday. Yet, if he's fired today, looks like that pension will not kick in. San Francisco attorney Harmeet Dillon, who's also the national committee woman for the Republican National Committee for California, is with us now. Harmeet, breaking news tonight. This really should have happened a long time ago. I don't know why they wait until 2 days before he would retire and his pension would kick in. But nevertheless, this is the news tonight. Your reaction?
Well, I agree with you, Laura. I think this should have been done a while back, and the FBI Director Wray has already taken steps to remove McCabe from any positions of authority. But I guess the triggering event here is the Office of Professional Responsibility investigation and recommendation, and I guess the Attorney General did not want to act until he had that recommendation in hand and make the decision himself. So I'm glad this action has been taken. Clearly, Mr. McCabe was at the heart of a number of troubling controversies at the FBI, starting before the election and then continuing through today. So maybe this is the beginning of some reckoning happening at the FBI with this head rolling. And of course, there are others, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and others who are involved in these.
Yeah, we have the Peter Strzok news. Yeah, we have this Peter Strzok news that we're also going to get to, his relationship with the judge who has since recused himself. Let's go to Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, this just broke minutes ago, the Washington Post. McCabe is out. Your reaction?
Well, I want to see the evidence. If the evidence conclusively demonstrates that he was less than candid and misled investigators, then the firing seems justified. But I think you have to have a fairly high threshold to fire somebody on the eve of his retirement and take away a pension that he's earned over a long, long period of time.
20 years.
Of pretty good service. So, yeah, I want to see this. I want to see the evidence. If the evidence justifies it, fine. As far as Strzok is concerned, that seems to be an open and shut case for firing.
Yeah, we're going to get to Strzok. Yeah, let's get to Strzok in a minute, and let's hold that separately because that's a separate issue involving the judge in the case, which, again, this comes out today after investigative reporter Sarah Carter breaks a story, which, it's like we keep saying every day, it can't get worse, but it keeps getting worse. Joining us now, and we're delighted she's with us, is Sarah Carter, who broke the story about Peter Strzok's friendship with the judge in the case. Sarah, we were talking just a few minutes ago in the hallway. You said keep your eye out for the McCabe firing. It could happen. You have good sources in justice because it did happen. Tell us what led to this happening 2 days before he would have gotten his pension. It seems a little odd that it would be happening this late. Why did it take this long for the Office of Professional Responsibility to come to this decision?
Okay, the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, did come to the decision that they wanted him fired after Michael Horowitz uncovered a lot of information on Andrew McCabe.
The Inspector General.
Exactly, the Inspector General at the DOJ. And that was then referred to OPR. And I think there's a lot of extenuating circumstances here. I don't think we've heard everything. I think there's a lot more than just misleading the IG and the FBI and also leaks, which is what has been reported, right? So we only know a little bit.
Give us the 2 or 3 things that are the most egregious that have been out there that called into question his professionalism in handling his job.
Oh, I think certainly the leaking to the media, number one.
Yep.
Also, the fact that he lied. He basically lied to the FBI, to his own employers, and to the IG. And I think that about his relationship, actually, and his friendships with Strzok, about what was happening with the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And remember, he gave that information to the Wall Street Journal. Apparently, he authorized that. And when they broke that story, and then he went back and the IG said, hey, were you responsible for authorizing these leaks? He said no. That's according to sources that I've spoken with. But I think this goes far beyond that. I think they're also looking at possible criminal charges, and that could be very serious.
Wow. Alan Dershowitz and Harmeet. Let's go to Harmeet first. Criminal charges against Andrew McCabe. This is the second time I've heard this today. The earlier time was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon from one of my sources in the Justice Department today that said, you all know just a little bit of what's gone on with Andrew McCabe. Again, 20-year veteran of the department, very well respected for years, and yet apparently we don't know what the OPR knows and what the Inspector General knows. We'll be finding out in the coming days. Harmeet. Yes,
I would have to agree with Sarah. It seems hard to believe that he would get fired for simply the leaking, although the leaking is obviously very egregious. The Wall Street Journal story that came out that was the product of those leaks was, clearly attempted to paint his role in a different light than was true, and a lot of other politicking going on in that story. So that was pretty shocking. But this seems like turnabout is fair play in a way. We all know, we've seen the stories about how, General Flynn has been indicted and asked to plead guilty on charges of a lie to the FBI, and where you have the FBI number 3 in command and temporarily number 1 in command lying himself to other FBI agents, it seems appropriate to hold them to the same standard.
Professor Dershowitz, again, this is wild. On a Friday night, 2 days before a man who's served the government for decades and was very well respected before the Hillary email investigation, I think, took place, to be fired in this way, I have to take Sarah and her reporting to heart here. I don't think they would risk firing him were it not for some fairly serious information that has come to light and that will be reported by the IG.
That sounds right to me. This afternoon, I was saying that I think there has to be a high burden before you fire somebody who's performed in a distinguished way for 20 years. But I have a lot of experience with the OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility. They don't generally go after their own. They generally whitewash their own. And when the OPR comes to this conclusion, you really have to give it some credibility. I still want to see the evidence, but I bet you we'll see evidence that's far more compelling than what we've heard about up to now. And when they're talking about criminal charges, that sounds very, very serious. It's distressing because I had a lot of respect for McCabe based on what people who've worked in the FBI have told me over the years. But you can't have a double standard. You have to have the same standard for Democrat, for Republican, for people who've been in the FBI, and for civilians. And if that standard has been met for criminal prosecution and for firing, so be it.
And folks, we just got the Attorney General's statement, which I'm going to read. He writes, the FBI expects every employee to adhere to the highest standards of honesty, integrity, and accountability. As the OPR proposal stated, all FBI employees know that lacking candor under oath results in dismissal, and that our integrity is our brand. Pursuant to Department Order 1202, and based on the report of the Inspector General, the findings of the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility, and the recommendation of the department's senior career official, I have terminated the employment of Andrew McCabe effective immediately. He goes on to say, the FBI expects every employee to adhere to the highest standards of honesty, integrity, and accountability. And then he went on to say, both the Office of Inspector General and the OPR reports concluded that McCabe had made an unauthorized disclosure to the news media, Sarah said, and lacked candor under oath on multiple occasions. So this seems, in the way it's worded, seems like an open and shut case. You cannot make exceptions even for someone with a very distinguished career as a civil servant, as a career professional. You know, people make mistakes for a variety of reasons, or people do things for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to try to get into his head. But I do not think the Office of Professional Responsibility and Sessions, with all of the media spotlight on them, would take this action were it not very serious. Sarah, you've been reporting on the Peter Strzok issue, which is another issue we have to talk to you about. His relationship with the presiding Judge Contreras in the case, This, when you published this today, I was reading this going, this can't be happening. Explain to our viewers what happened.
Well, it was stunning. What we discovered was through these text messages, and actually it was the House Oversight Committee, their due diligence.
Yep.
I mean, they had sent people over and over again to the DOJ, and they finally pieced together what was redacted, what was handed to them. So they got to see semi-redacted documents that showed that Peter Strzok had a very close friendship with Judge Contreras. This
not
is
revealed.
Not revealed.
Disclosed.
Not disclosed.
That's
the
outrageous.
DOJ did not disclose this. So, I mean, remember, we were all left wondering, why did he recuse himself? So, on December 1st, 2017, Michael Flynn goes before the judge. He pleads guilty. That's Judge Contreras. On the 7th of December, 2017, Judge Contreras recuses himself. But now we know that he and Peter Strzok for a long time had been friends. And he also sat, on the
crazy.
He also sat on the FISC court. And Peter Strzok,
FISA, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So he was in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. He took care of the FISA applications. And Peter Strzok, who was in charge of counterintelligence and Russia, would go to the FISA court for these warrants to be signed.
And presumably
yeah. So what's really interesting, Laura, is inside those...
Hold on, Alan will get to you in 1 second.
Inside those text messages, he specifically states
we
with
have
Page. Yeah, if you see them, he specifically knows that if he continues this relationship, it could present a
here's what he
problem.
says. This is Peter Strzok's text, and Alan, you can react. He, Contreras, super thoughtful and rigorous about ethics and conflicts, suggested a social setting with others would probably be better than a one-on-one meeting. I'm sorry, I was just going to have to invite you to a cocktail party. Of course you'll be there. Have to come up with some other work people cover for action. Odd. And then it goes on, and there's other things as well. But Professor Dershowitz, that's wild.
That's the smoking gun. The smoking gun is the attempt to meet with him surreptitiously with a cover so that nobody will be able to say that they met in a way that required recusal. This guy Strzok seems like he is really a piece of work. He should have recused himself initially improperly. He didn't know about the message. As soon as he found out about the message, he took him off the case. But Strzok knew that he had sent these messages, and he should have recused himself. He should be fired. He violated every possible rule of ethics in the FBI, and I think he has to go. I'm surprised he hasn't been fired up until now.
Alan and Harmeet, he uses the phrase, with some other work people cover
right,
for
there's the term cover,
right.
Laura. There's the term
that's recusal. The smoking gun.
Cover, Harmeet. He needs cover.
No, I mean, and this type of ex parte communication is outrageous. And if this isn't a conspiracy, I don't know what is. You have multiple people, and there's a conversation there in the text messages about a dinner party for 6. So you have multiple people who are around Strzok and Page conspiring to somehow set up a conversation with the judge. I think it's outrageous, and in any federal court, a court should recuse himself. And we don't know why the judge recused himself.
How stupid can he be putting everything in writing, everything in emails, everything in messages?
He's a counterintelligence. This guy is supposed to be the best.
This is an unintelligent counterintelligence guy.
Okay, we got a McCabe statement. God, everything happens on Friday night. This is why we're happy we're live. Okay, Friday night, this is McCabe's statement. For the last year and a half, my family and I have been targets of an unrelenting assault on our reputation. In my service to this country, and my service, the articles too numerous to count, have leveled every sort of false, defamatory, and degrading allegation against us. The president's tweets have amplified and exacerbated it all. He called for my firing. He called for me to be stripped of my pension after more than 20 years of service. And all along, we have said nothing, never wanting to distract from the mission of the FBI by addressing the lies told and repeated about us. And that's a pretty clear statement. I mean, he thinks it's all unfair. It's a total witch hunt. Sarah, I'll let you close it.
Well, here's my question. How can he say that when it's his FBI? It's not the president. It's not the DOJ. It's OPR that is asking for him to be fired.
Office of Professional Responsibility, which is staffed with career professionals. FBI, judging.
That's right.
Andrew McCabe, top of the FBI.
And he had a lot of friends in OPR. So that should tell you something.
Alan, again, his statement is defiant, Alan.
It is, but if he thought people were after him, then he should have been so careful about how he responded. And yet, if people were after them, he gave them the ammunition by not being responsive, by being deceptive, by being untruthful. So he opened the door to allowing the OPR to make the kinds of conclusions that they came to. It sounds to me like he doesn't have much of a leg to stand on. I'm sympathetic to him, but it seems to me he's made his own bed.
And Laura, he's 49. He'll be just fine. We've seen lots of people in the swamp do just fine without their pensions at the age of 49 in Washington, D.C. You note that in his statement, he doesn't deny the charges that the OPR leveled against him. And I think that's very telling as well. It's deflection to point to the president in his tweets. That's very fashionable in Washington, but I don't think he has answered any of the questions.
What does this do, Sarah, to the integrity, whatever's left of it, of the Hillary email investigation, though? So now the guy who was leading the investigation got Peter Strzok problems. We got McCabe fired. How does
Comey fired?
Yeah, of course, Comey gone. By the way, we have a photo of Jim Comey. We had a sighting of him today in McLean, Virginia. Do you have it, Nick? Can you put up on screen? He looked very concerned at Balducci's today. Do we have the picture? Yes, 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 yes. We'll get it in a second. But so he was spotted today. We tried to get him to come on the show. He said he'll think about it. So, okay. But what does this say about the integrity of the Hillary email investigation before we get into what happened after that?
Well, I
with
think
Flynn and so forth.
Well, I think this says a lot about the integrity of that investigation, or lack of integrity. And we're now waiting for the Inspector General's report, Michael Horowitz's report. And it's not just going to be one. It's going to be multiple series of reports. 1.2 million documents that he's obtained. And we're going to learn a lot more than just what happened here with Andrew McCabe. We're going to learn about Comey, and we're going to learn about that investigation. And I think it's going to be absolutely explosive, according to the sources that I've spoken with.
Yeah. We're working on a couple of stories which we hope to bring to our viewers next week about who hacked them and who didn't hack them, and what he did or did not do to get to the bottom of that. So we'll bring that to our viewers next week. Now, Fox News if you have Comey on the show, please ask him why the former head of the FBI had to leak and launder information through a Columbia law professor, why he didn't have the courage to stand up in front of the TV cameras and say directly to the TV cameras what he leaked through a Columbia law professor. I can't understand how a former director of the FBI could do that. I hope you ask him that question if he's on I've already written it down, Alan. It's already written down on my sheet. Thank you very much. I'll go for other show prep I'm going to as well. I love that. All right, now we have Fox News Justice Department producer Jake Gibson on the phone now, who's been tracking the story down all night. Jake.
Hey, how are you, Lawrence? So we've been following this all day, and this has been a thing that is slow rolled out throughout the day that we kind of thought was coming, and now it finally popped. And the Attorney General basically said that he has terminated, as you know, former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, tonight. And this all comes back to this IG report, and specifically on what he said to the Inspector General Horowitz and whether or not he misled Inspector General Horowitz. And that's what we know so far. There could be a lot more when the IG report finally comes out. What we know right now is that the Inspector General is not, and the Attorney General are not happy with the statements that McCabe made about what his role was in letting a reporter speak to one of his subordinates at the FBI. That part was fine. It's the questions that happen afterwards and whether or not he told the truth about that. That's what directly led to this. If you believe what we hear coming out from the Department of Justice today.
Jake Gibson, thanks for that input. Sarah, this on a Friday night, 2 days again before his pension kicked in, it has to be explosive. I think we know about a fourth of what really happened here, and I'm hoping that this Inspector General report comes out soon. Do you have any idea of when if it's going to come out in multiple stages or just one report total, all of it once?
I don't have any idea of how it's going to be delivered. I do know for a fact that it is going to be multiple reports.
Okay.
So I think that's what's important here. If it's multiple reports, that means he was looking at an array of things that were going on in this Hillary Clinton email investigation by the FBI and how they handled it. We know it's going to focus on Comey. We know it's going to focus on McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page.
The editing of the non-indictment indictment?
Exactly. The editing of the non-indictment indictment. Also, what I think is going to be very interesting, he may have all the text messages, the SMS messages of McCabe that nobody's been able to get their hands on. And I think that's going to be very telling, too. We don't know how far people in the FBI went. Did they obstruct? Did they obstruct anything in that investigation? Yep. And that's going to be a really important question. And we already know what Comey's done. What was McCabe's role in that? And who else was involved?
Professor Dershowitz, there was a point raised today on a variety of channels and in a variety of print publications that here we have the Republican Party, mostly Republicans, calling into question the wonderful patriots, public servants in the intel agencies. And how dare you try to call into question what the intel agencies are doing? And I was on the radio this morning responding to that. And I said, well, wait a second. I mean, these are people. First of all, they make mistakes. We made a big mistake at 9/11. We thought we had something we didn't. We've had history littered with examples of the intel agencies getting things wrong because they're making snapshot judgments with the information they have, and sometimes they're biased.
Sure.
I mean, they're like people. They're biased. So the idea that you can never call into question the ethics, integrity, or just judgment, forget any malfeasance, of the intel agencies, to me seems to fly in the face of the tradition of liberalism. And they've always called into question government actions.
Of course. I mean, as a civil libertarian, I'm actually pleased to see this, to see the Republicans now coming out and questioning the intel agencies. The Democrats, who traditionally have done that through the Church Committee and others, are now saying, oh, no, 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 no. Intelligence agencies never make mistakes. The Justice Department never makes mistakes. Everything's perfect when it comes to prosecuting. We're seeing a little bit of a flip here because, you know, we have the criminalization of political differences on both sides. And when that happens, you see people make hypocritical statements. But I'm thrilled that we're seeing critical analysis being done of the intel agencies. That's very, very important. I think it's important whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat. We need accountability. Who will guard the guardians? And the guardians are people today who have access to the intelligence. And so I'm so happy that we're seeing a more critical eye being looked at intelligence gathering, being looked at who is doing the investigation. I think that's very healthy in a democracy.
All right, we're going to continue this. We're not taking a break. The news is too big. Joining us now on the phone, retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon. Bobby, again, Friday night, firing Andrew McCabe, one of the more well-respected civil servants in our FBI, really of the last 25 years. He had a fantastic reputation until he got mixed up with the Clintons or examining the Hillary Clinton private email server. Your reaction to the news of the night?
Well, I'm not surprised, and I'm kind of heartened by it. I mean, look, I was a special agent for 27 years at the street level. I was a working agent. I chose not to go up into management. If I had done the same transgressions as Andrew McCabe had done, I would have been fired before now. So it's very important. There's a history in the FBI of discipline being meted out differently by to the street level agents and to the senior executives. And I'm glad to see that in this case, where you have a lack of candor, which is, by the way, from day one in Quantico in the FBI Academy, they nail into our heads that lack of candor is the biggest thing that'll get you fired. Lack of candor is a key. It's almost always worse than whatever you've done to hide the lie is the lie itself. So day one at Quantico, you're told, you know, don't lie. If you get caught doing something wrong, take your lumps, take your discipline, but don't lie about it. If you lie about it, you're almost assuredly going to be fired for it. And lack of candor is the number one reason FBI agents get fired. And you know that going in. It's not a surprise. All of us actually were expecting it, and we would have been, morale would have been taking a big hit on the street level if this guy was not fired for lack of candor. Once the IG said we found a verified lack of candor, then he needed to be fired because a street agent would have certainly been fired.
Harmeet, I want to go back to you. It looks like this IG report in the investigation continues. That one of the reasons why the report has not yet been issued is because our sources are telling us they keep learning more by the day. Again, they're examining all of the sensitive investigations leading up to the presidential election in 2016. So the Hillary email investigation, perhaps, of course, bleeding into the Russian meddling investigation. This is not an isolated, narrow investigation. It seems to be getting broader, which is one of the reasons why this report could be delayed. It might not come out when we thought it was going to come out. And it has to lead us all to conclude that we are, again, just skimming the surface so far of what we know about potential biases in this investigation, Harmeet.
Absolutely. And one of the investigations that you didn't mention is the Hillary Clinton Foundation investigation. And that was actually the subject of that Wall Street Journal article that grew out of the leaking from the 2 FBI agents that was authorized by McCabe. So we see this, it's not an exaggeration to say it's a web. And, you know, you see a few people in the middle of it, but the web seems to be spreading. And there's 1.2 million documents we're aware of that the Inspector General is looking at. That's a huge amount of documents. It doesn't surprise me it's taken this amount of time. But we have by no means begun to see the end of it. Like I said, I think that this firing today may be the beginning of the reckoning happening in the FBI, which will be for the betterment of the agency. And as a Republican civil libertarian, I have to say that, unbridled power that the government has is of deep concern. Republicans have begun to wake up when we see the Michael Flynn investigation. It was shocking. And that's a good thing for our country. We are the party of limited government, and we need to respect that and honor that and get back to that tradition.
I'm so glad you said that, Harmeet. And
Alan, here we have liberals and conservatives agreeing.
Thank you. This is where civil libertarians, conservatives can agree. Unbridled power. Unchecked power to spy on American citizens for flimsy reasons, as they did with this Carter Page. Anyone looking at Carter Page, talking to him for more than 5 minutes, knows the idea that Carter Page is like working with the Russians to throw the election is ridiculous. I'm sorry. I would bet my house on it. It's ridiculous. Alan, go.
Well, remember, there's one other possibility of how information may be forthcoming. That is, McCabe may sue under his contract to get his pension. And there might be discovery and a trial. And that would be a way of getting even more information that maybe the OPR doesn't want to produce, but would have to produce as part of discovery to justify their actions, because he has a remedy under law.
Well, his remedy under law is very limited, though. FBI does not have the same protections of the Merit Service Protection Board as other federal employees. So I think he's very limited, frankly.
Let me read a little bit more. We have more now from Andrew McCabe's statement just released, guys, after his firing tonight. He writes, the OIGs, the Officer Inspector General, focus on me, and this report became a part of an unprecedented effort by the administration, driven by the president himself, to remove me from my position, destroy my reputation, and possibly strip me of a pension that I worked 21 years to earn. Sarah Carter, he is focusing on the president. And I think that the fact that he's going back to Trump tells you a lot more about Andrew McCabe. He is furious at the president. It's directed at the president. He's going to get a lot of attention because of his focus on the president.
Well, this is what's so interesting. He believes this is all about the president. No, this is about his colleagues at OPR who found him the lack of candor, who found he had
lying.
Plain and simple, he lied. A lot of former FBI agents that I've spoken to and current said, I hope he's fired. Is he going to get fired today? That's all I kept hearing all day, because they realized that if they had done this, they would have been fired too. And there's a lot of ongoing investigations right now. This is not just about Michael Horowitz. At the DOJ right now, remember, there is a prosecutor looking into the unmasking, the FISA abuse that has been taking place with Carter Page in particular. So we've got a number of investigations, and McCabe is worried. And one thing that I did hear is that McCabe has said over and over again, if I go down, I'm taking everybody else
people down with him. Oh, now we have Ron Kessler, author of the book, The Secrets of the FBI, on. And Ron, I know you're not probably surprised by any of this, but I think Harmeet's point, Alan's point, Sarah's made it, Bobby's made it, This could be the beginning of something really great for the country. Namely, we clean out the underbrush in our intelligence agencies. I know that's a big call and it's a big wish, but it's time to clean out the problem people. And if Andrew McCabe lied and misrepresented, as the Office of the Inspector General is going to conclude, and Office of Professional Responsibility confirmed, that is a real problem. You're supposed to be calling balls and strikes at the FBI, not, advocating on behalf of one person because of their political party. Ron, your reaction tonight?
Well, sure. It is absolutely shocking. There has been no case of proven abuse at such a high level of the FBI since William Sessions was fired as FBI director over his abuses, which was, by the way, because of what I found in one of my FBI books. But it's good that we're finally getting some clarity on some of these issues. There's been a lot of smoke and mirrors, I think, about some of the allegations involving the FBI. But here it's clear cut, and he is being held accountable. And I think it's positive that we're going to try to get some resolution to all these issues.
Well, and the idea that this is just mean-spirited targeting of the FBI, Sarah Carter. What might this mean down the line for Loretta Lynch and perhaps even Barack Obama? Because the idea that all those people, no one knew what was going on, no one had any idea. What could we be looking at here?
Oh, we could be looking at an unraveling now so quickly of information and evidence on everyone. I mean, this is going to push everything over the edge. Comey has got to be worried. Loretta Lynch has got to be worried. And Barack Obama, because remember, Susan Rice, she even sent that email to herself after she had met with...
Remind everyone about the email.
Yeah, so they had this January 5th meeting, 2017, where she was there with Barack Obama, and I believe was Loretta Lynch there as well. And so she sends herself days after an email basically saying, and President Obama wanted everything to be done by the book. Well, why would she do that? And that raised questions. So now they're saying, why would you do that? Why would you send this email to yourself? And why would you try to exonerate him? And why were you all meeting about this? And remember, another person that needs to be very worried right now is former CIA Director John Brennan and James Clapper, who we know now has been looked at for leaking. So he's also somebody that they believe leaked information on the dossier to the media to get that ball rolling. It just really appears on its face that all the evidence pointed to the fact, and I know McCabe's blaming Trump, but it looked like all of these people were ready to take Trump out and wanted to.
Let's go back, Professor Dershowitz, to the Peter Strzok, Lisa Page text that first really captured the attention of the American people, where they were going back and forth. They were talking about insurance policies. Clearly, they were worried, but not overly worried, but worried that, look, we got to make sure this doesn't happen. Got to make sure that Trump doesn't happen. That was the clear subtext of what the two were talking about with each other. It seems like the idea that they were doing that in isolation, just the two of them, that there was no other conversation with others about an insurance policy, that seems to me to be hard to believe, especially after the Sally Yates with her, big resignation and marching over to interview Mike Flynn. Now it looks like Mike Flynn might not have lied. In fact, apparently the FBI agents didn't think he lied after his first interview. Andrew Weissman, all of these individuals who were pals with Mueller at his old law firm, and obviously seem to be very, very partisan. Alan, this is a lot to take in tonight, but your final thoughts.
Well, I think there's too much partisanship in the FBI. The FBI is supposed to be the one organization that is absolutely nonpartisan, has no interest in who wins an election. And when you have the kinds of messages that we see going back and forth between Strzok and his friend, the prosecutor, it certainly shows that they had a very, very strong bias. And you can't put that kind of bias aside when you're a prosecutor. Look, there may have been people in the FBI who also had a strong bias in favor of Trump and against Clinton, but they didn't act on their bias, and they didn't send messages to each other on their bias. And I think that the more we learn, the better it is for America. And we have to make sure that the FBI goes back to being a nonpartisan, neutral, objective, investigative agency, not an agency that decides who to prosecute, but an agency that simply uncovers the evidence and presents it to prosecutors. And we've lost that role of the FBI, and I think we have to regain it. That's one of the most important lessons we can learn from this tragedy.
Now, absolutely. Let's go back to Fox Justice Department producer Jake Gibson on the phone now, who has an important addendum for us. Jake.
I just wanted to make one point, Laura, and thank you so much for coming back to me. It's that when we talk about the release of the IG report, and we've been waiting, and everybody's trying to figure out when this will be released, and Inspector General Horowitz had hinted that it may be in March. However, I have been told by Department of Justice officials that if there is a criminal referral that is to come out of this report, that would delay the release of the report. In other words, if there was a criminal report that comes out of this, that could go to a grand jury. And then if that led to an indictment, then the resolution of that indictment, we might have to wait for the criminal for the report. So you can read the tea leaves there, if you know what I mean.
Well, Harmeet, if there is a criminal referral coming out of the investigation that is part of this entire morass that involves President Trump and the Hillary Clinton email, I mean, is that not tainting the entire investigation? I mean, I'm not saying this as in a partisan way, but if I was the subject of an investigation and I heard, well, these guys are sending emails and then this other guy's lying and he's leaking, it seems like that entire thing has to be thrown out. And I know that sounds extreme, but if I were the subject of the investigation, that's what I'd be arguing in court. It's that the whole thing is the fruit of the poisonous tree.
Absolutely. And I don't think you have to wait for a criminal indictment to make that argument. I think that argument is already on the table with the text messages, with the lying to the FISA court, withholding of evidence from the FISA court, with regard to the hushing up of some of these investigations, the weird way that the Hillary Clinton investigation on the email, the Clinton Foundation, which is, I think, rife with criminal conduct, has been brushed under the carpet. There are a lot of issues here that would lead, and it's all the same people. It's all the same 3 or 4 people who are at the heart of this so far. So I think all of that, if I were a defendant, I would be absolutely jumping up and down and raising those issues already, regardless of the criminal investigation. And obviously,
go ahead.
But remember one thing. It's very important to distinguish between ethical violations, which is what the OPR looks at, and criminal conduct. Again, let's not slip from unethical conduct or bad conduct into crimes. We have to know what crime it is that was committed. Did anybody lie to a law enforcement official? That's a crime. Was there obstruction of justice? That's a crime. But simply not being candid or withholding information from the FISA court, that's unethical, but probably doesn't cross the line into criminal conduct.
Yeah, materially misleading the FISA court. However, Alan, I think you said this on the show a few weeks ago, depending on what it is and for what reason you're doing it and the predicate that precedes all this, that could be criminal. I mean, if you are materially withholding information because you know that that information could change the outcome of the decision on whether to grant the warrant, that's you're right. It's on a line, but you're right. We shouldn't just blow to the, a crime was committed here. Joining us now on the phone is George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley, who's been watching these events unfold tonight. Professor Turley, your reaction to the firing of Andrew McCabe 2 days before his 50th birthday, when his pension would have kicked in after 20 years of service at the FBI. Professor.
Well, I'm not surprised by the decision. Some of us said it was very likely that he would be fired. The reason is that this is an exceedingly rare recommendation coming from the Office of Professional Responsibility. It's virtually unheard of for someone who held the position of McCabe. So it was very unlikely, in my view, that Jeff Sessions would not follow that career advice. He followed that advice in his own recusal. He yielded to career officers who had recommended that course. So I've said before, I thought it was very likely that he would do precisely what he did tonight. What is, I think, a more difficult question that will be presented for the Justice Department is how they will go from here, because the suggestion is that the Inspector General found that McCabe intentionally misled their investigators. That's almost indistinguishable from what they charged Michael Flynn with.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
So the question that's going to be on the table here is one of continuity. Flynn is accused of lying about not the meeting with the Russians. He apparently admitted that, but simply talking about sanctions.
Sanctions.
The meeting with the Russians was not illegal. In this case, McCabe is accused of misleading investigators on something that was a violation of federal rules. And so I think the question will be raised is, well, is this simply a matter of a pension, or because for Flynn it was a matter of prison?
Yeah, it can't be. 18 U.S.C. 1001. And now it looks like Michael Flynn might not have had that requisite intent to lie. We're going to keep hearing about it. He's trying to withdraw perhaps that guilty plea. We're going to keep this panel going. Let's bring in Republican Congressman from the great state of Wisconsin, Sean Duffy. Sean, we knew you were going to be on, so we have a big breaking news night. We got Andrew McCabe, Deputy Director of the FBI, fired right before his big pension was going to kick in. Huge controversy swirling around this. Some already crying foul, saying this firing is political, but it was done at the behest of the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is not a political office, and their conclusions about his conduct apparently devastating. Congressman Duffy.
Yes, although I've criticized Jeff Sessions quite a bit, that he actually held back a little bit and waited for the Office of Professional Responsibility to give us a recommendation in regard to Mr. McCabe. I think he handled it correctly. But Laura, no one gets fired in the swamp. That we have a former head of the FBI who's now fired, I think shows that the system actually can work. And I look at the FBI, I mean, not the boots on the ground, but at the top of the FBI, this place is rotten. And thank God Donald Trump was elected so we can start clearing out all of these rotten individuals who are playing partisanship with one of the most powerful agencies that exist in Washington. Think back to Lois Lerner. I mean, Lois Lerner at the IRS, who targeted conservatives and conservative groups. The status quo was you leave those people in, you let them retire, and you let them get their pensions. Under Donald Trump draining the swamp, you start firing people who violate the ethics within their agency or violate the law. This is a great thing.
Yeah, there's Frank Montoya Jr., former senior FBI official, saying that this is a political hit job on McCabe, his supposed ideological bias, the fact his wife ran for office as a Democrat, the attacks on his competence are way out of line. Sarah.
Again, no, because this can't be a political hit job if OPR, the Office of Professional Responsibility, got documentation, provable facts that he violated his oath as an FBI agent and lied. And who did he lie to? He lied to the Inspector General. He probably lied to other FBI agents. And this could be leading to criminal charges. So, no, I'm sorry. I know they want to defend him. He did serve his country. It's a tragedy that we see this happen before everyone. But we really need to know the truth. And the FBI, as well as other agencies, really need to be cleaned out.
Was he under investigation before the Trump administration? Was this investigation predating Donald Trump? Because I keep hearing whispers about that.
Well, there are whispers, and part of that is due to the fact that he was under investigation for possible Hatch Act violations. He was referred by Senator Grassley as well to be investigated for not appropriately disclosing the amount of money his wife got from the unsuccessful bid for the state Senate in Virginia.
Terry McAuliffe.
Yeah, from Terry McAuliffe.
His PAC.
Yeah, and so there were some issues there. Also a sexual discrimination lawsuit. There were issues there that he had to deal with. But this investigation spiraled out of the evidence that came forth when we started to realize McCabe was at the center of this, Comey was at the center of this, text messages, the investigation that Michael Horowitz has done exceptionally well.
Am I good to roll?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's go. Sean, hold that thought for 1 second because we have Congressman Mark Meadows on the phone as well from the House Freedom Caucus, member of the Oversight Committee. Congressman Meadows, look, we for months have been saying, how did you have the same people who were investigating Hillary's private email server also oversee the investigation into Donald Trump's possible collusion with the Russians? We saw that with Peter Strzok. We then found his text messages, and now the conclusion by the Office of Professional Responsibility about Andrew McCabe leading to his firing tonight. Your reaction to this huge breaking news night, Congressman Meadows?
Well, it is unbelievable news, and like my good friend Sean Duffy was talking about, the fact that no one ever gets fired from the FBI and DOJ without there being real credible evidence. So the suggestion that this is a political hit job is just not accurate. I mean, when you look at the responsibilities of OPR, you know, they've got certain guidelines that they go by. But what it does call into question, Laura, is this: is if you have now Peter Strzok and Andy McCabe both having questionable, actions on their part, what does it mean about the whole investigation and what has led up to that? I can tell you there's more information coming. The Inspector General is doing a very good job. But this action tonight would not have happened if there was not credible wrongdoing on the part of Andrew McCabe.
What about the morale of the FBI at this point? We've heard for some time that there has been a desperately low morale. The credibility of the FBI being questioned over the last few years, even going all the way back to 9/11, of course, with the CIA and the intelligence there. But the intel community, they have this vaunted reputation. They're there to protect us. So what about the FBI's morale, Congressman Duffy, at this point? Can it begin to recover? Will this be seen as a shot across the bow? Professional career agents, I think they don't like this cloud hanging over the FBI. They just want to do their job. There's good people there.
I agree. They show up, they sign up to serve their country in the FBI or the DOJ. And when you have the top of an agency or a bureau that's rotten like this, it's disheartening. But I think you give them hope when you start to clear it out and say, we're going to get back to the basics, back to an honorable organization. And so I think this is the beginning of a new and fresh start for the FBI. But Laura, what I think is interesting, though, we've been wondering, how did all these leaks happen? How are all these stories getting into the press over the last year and a half on Donald Trump and the investigation? And now we see that it was coming from Andrew McCabe and from James Comey himself. The question I have is, remember when Comey went and briefed Donald Trump on the dossier? No one reported on the dossier until someone leaked that Comey was actually briefing the president on the president-elect, Donald Trump, on the dossier. They leaked that to CNN, and all of a sudden, every news outlet could report on the dossier. The leaking that came, I think, from the FBI and the DOJ was advancing their story against Donald Trump, and it wasn't some low-level people. It appears from the information we're now getting is it was coming from the very highest level of the FBI and the DOJ.
Well, and the leaking continues, by the way. The leaking isn't over. The leaking continues, whether McCabe is there or not. By the way, we have more from Andrew McCabe's statement. This is the gift that keeps on giving. He says, this is on the special counsel, he says, this attack on my credibility is one part of a larger effort, not just to slander me personally, but to taint the FBI, law enforcement, and intel professionals more generally. It is part of this administration's ongoing war on the FBI and the efforts of the special counsel investigation, which continue to this day. Their persistence in this campaign only highlights the importance of the special counsel's work. Not to say, Alan Dershowitz, that he's prejudicing the special counsel's work. There's not that Andrew McCabe thinks the special counsel has enough to write an impeachment report against the president. I think that part of the statement is very revealing. Your reaction?
Yeah, well, first of all, the one office that the president cannot influence is the Office of Professional Responsibility. Let's assume McCabe is correct, that the president wanted to get rid of him. Let's even assume that the Attorney General wanted to get rid of him. There's no way they can influence the Office of Professional Responsibility. They are civil servants. They are career people. They are non-political. Nobody has ever questioned their credibility. They just can't do that. And so I think the real fallacy of his whole trying to politicize this thing is he can't get around the fact that the Office of Professional Responsibility is doing this. Now, I want to point out one irony. We're all talking about leaking. And if one result of this is if we can stop leaking from the government, we will all be so much better off. But how much of the news reporting that we've done tonight came from leaks? Yeah. The media loves leaking. The media lives by leaks, and yet we condemn leaks. I think we have to all get together and say, finally, the Justice Department, the FBI, have to stop leaking, even if that means the media doesn't get some of the stories it wants. You just can't have real justice by leaking.
But it's about the type of leaks. This is about the type of leaks. Look, when the dossier was leaked and it went out, remember this, it went out. Now we believe it's James Clapper. That's the information that I've received, that it was James Clapper that leaked the dossier to CNN and basically said that the president had been briefed. That gave it legs of its own.
Oh, suddenly it was like a credible document.
This was an unverified and salacious document. This was former Director Comey's own words. This wasn't a credible document. That's the difference. That's the difference between a solid leak because somebody's trying to get information out there and a false leak.
And I want to just remind everybody.
But I think you can't start making that distinction.
Hold on. I want you to continue that thought. But I want to remind our viewers for a moment. Andrew McCabe, the reason that he began to, first his credibility began to be called into question was because in 2015, his wife was running for state office in Virginia. At the time, he was leading up the investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Why'd she have the server? Why did we suddenly lose all these emails? And he did not reveal his wife's having received several $100,000 from the PAC closely associated with Terry McAuliffe, who's like this with the Clintons. Now, if you are as experienced and as credible as Andrew McCabe was before then, and you do not reveal this, you do not belong in the position of Deputy Director of the FBI. I, as a first-year associate, Professor Dershowitz, knew, as a first-year associate at Skadden Arps, I knew that you could not do that. You had to reveal the potential conflict of interest, at least the appearance. And then people would probably say, that's okay, thanks for revealing it. But you have to reveal it. The fact that he didn't tainted that Hillary investigation, period. And I'm sorry, that in and of itself, I'd remove him just for that. Dershowitz, and then let's go to Harmeet, and then to Sean.
No, there's no question that when you know you have a conflict, you must reveal it. That was Strzok's problem. That was McCabe's problem. We have to always have transparency. Let the Office of Professional Responsibility decide whether there's a conflict or not. But you can't withhold information that might lead to you being recused based on a conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just learned, by the way, CBS News reporter Paula Reed is reporting tonight that McCabe learned of his firing through a press release. At least he wasn't on the toilet like Rex Tillerson was, according to the story earlier.
I find that hard.
He was on the toilet, and Kelly called him. We didn't even get to that story.
I find that hard to believe. I find that hard to believe.
Well, come on. He knew he was on his way. Come on. Harmeet, so we're learning all the details of how he's fired, his statement. He is clearly going to be on a mission. I'm sorry. We're going to learn more about Andrew McCabe's feelings about President Trump in the coming weeks and months, because that statement that he released tonight is all about Trump. Basically, Trump, you're guilty. I'm sorry, you read between the lines. It's about Donald Trump wants to deep six this special counsel investigation because he has something to hide. You read between the lines, it's clear.
Right, absolutely, Laura. I wanted to talk about that for a second. I mean, he spends a lot of effort trying to point the finger at Donald Trump, who was actually fairly a late comer to this whole debacle. What he should be looking at, and what has historically been the case, is that the Clintons managed to somehow destroy everything that they touch. And this man's sterling career, up to the point that he'd gotten involved with his wife taking money from Clinton sources, that was really the beginning of the end for him in this tragedy. And so no one is, I think, in this type of situation introspective enough to recognize that. And obviously there's going to be some spin machine from the Clintons and others involved in the next phases of this story. But Mr. McCabe is clearly in denial as to his own role in this unfortunate situation.
All right, we now have former deputy independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation, Saul Weisenberg, on the phone now. Saul, you were on radio with me this morning. Both of us kind of thought, they're not going to get rid of McCabe. It's only like 36 hours till he turns 50 years old. Your reaction tonight, Saul?
Well, we were obviously wrong, Laura. And my reaction is it's a very, very sad day. What was in that OIG report that got sent to OPR must have been very clear and very serious for AG Sessions to have made the decision he made. I don't agree with a lot of his policy positions, but I have actually a lot of faith in his integrity. and this must have been pretty serious. And I think it's a sad day for the country. And I sure wish my old friend, Professor Ron Rotunda, who died 2 days ago, was here to see this, because I'd love to hear his comments.
Well, because he wrote the textbook, right, on ethics, as I recall, right? He wrote the big professional responsibility
he created,
textbook.
Laura, he created the field. Yeah,
he was
okay.
He was my student. He was my student, and I'm so proud to have had him as one of my students in my legal ethics class 30 or 40 years ago. He was a great, great man and a great contributor to legal ethics, and totally neutral, totally objective, always called it the way it should be called. What a great man he was.
He was incredible. His textbooks, I mean, at law school, amazing. Congressman Duffy, just reflecting on that for a moment and setting aside whether Donald Trump being involved and Hillary being involved, we as Americans have to have faith in our government, especially with the strong, potentially devastating effects of a prosecution and an investigation and surveillance of American citizens, that our investigative bodies are operating with complete and unquestionable integrity. Otherwise, at the end of it, we'll all say, that's not fair. How did you do that? We won't take to heart their ultimate conclusions, and we'll question them. And I think this is I hope Sarah's right. This is the beginning, I hope, of a cleaning out of this underbrush at FBI and maybe beyond. We need it badly.
You are absolutely right. We give incredible power to the FBI and the DOJ. We give them special tools to keep us safe from terrorists and bad actors around the world and in our country. And with those tools, we expect them to care for them with great emotion. And so I look at what's happened at the FBI. They haven't met that responsibility with the tools that we've given them. Either we take those tools away from them and the country is less safe, or they use those tools more effectively moving forward. I think what's going to happen moving forward with McCabe, and you saw that in his statement, this is, I have 8 kids, you have kids, this is classic 5th grader stuff. I've done something wrong, don't look at me, it's the other siblings in the house, it's Donald Trump, it's the Republicans, everyone's coming after me. Don't look at what I've done, look at everybody else. And what's going to happen is, if he goes after President Trump, you're going to have MSNBC, CNN, all the networks are going to join him in trying to use McCabe to attack Trump, instead of going, hey, look, we gave you incredible power, you abused it. You should be held to account, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Anyone who abuses power should be held to account under the law.
Well, they're going after the administration already tonight. They're saying this is all political. He's fired political, even though it's the Office of Professional Responsibility. It's crazy. Sarah, why has Peter Strzok and Lisa Page not been fired? Why are we rearranging the chairs on the Titanic here? Why have those two not been fired?
I don't know exactly, but I have talked to sources about this. There is a process that needs to take place. Remember, they're still questioning them. This is a huge investigation, so don't be surprised that that does not happen in the future. And who knows, maybe Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are talking. There could be a lot of things.
They could be cooperating for what? Because it'll reduce charges, or maybe they'll get immunity from prosecution.
Reduce charges, and they may have evidence that goes higher up the food chain. They may know what was going on all the way up to Comey.
Off-site meetings or whatever they were.
Exactly.
And Alan, I know we're sounding like, this is a murder mystery here, but we're going to the top. But if indeed Strzok and Page are looking themselves at dismissal, losing their own pensions, they might have an incentive to talk more about who else was involved in setting up an insurance policy to ensure that Donald Trump never get elected, or if he was elected, to certainly be dogged by an ongoing investigation. And that will certainly be interesting. Again, we haven't seen much from them, but I think Sarah's right. There are a lot of people who cooperate who you never hear about. Professor Dershowitz.
Well, I know he has a very sophisticated lawyer who is probably working behind the scenes to try to get the best deal for Strzok. I don't think Strzok has a future at the FBI, and I think at this point he has to be thinking about saving his freedom and his liberty and his professional reputation. So it wouldn't surprise me if there were ongoing negotiations involving him and his lawyer and whoever is doing the investigation. That's fairly typical in situations of this kind.
And Harmeet, we still have Andrew Weissman, who's still in the investigation. Of course, Weissman was, sending the, I support you text message or email to Sally Yates when she made her big point to resign in the early stages of the Trump administration. But he's still there.
No, that's not a crime.
And Bruce Orr still has a job. He's been demoted. But, I think that I disagree with Saul when he says it's a very sad day. It is a sad, personally, for McCabe. I think it is a good day for the country that we're beginning to see some heads rolling over there, because a lot of Americans have lost respect for the FBI, and that's a terrible thing. We should have respect for our law enforcement agencies, but when they leak, when they lie, when they frame people, when they engage in conspiracies, when they try to corrupt judges, that is unacceptable. And it's great that we're starting to see that be taken, them being held responsible for that.
Saul, you got about 20 seconds, my friend.
And I hope we do it on a nonpartisan basis. I hope we do it on a bipartisan, nonpartisan basis.
Alan, that's a great point. Saul, quickly.
It is a sad day, but it's also, you're right. It's if somebody did wrong, they need to be punished for it. So you can have both emotions.
All right, guys, thank you for all. What a phenomenal panel. I couldn't have asked for better people. Thank you for rolling with the breaking news tonight. You've got to love this quiet Friday nights in the Trump era. Ed Henry, who's in for Shannon Bream, is up next. Fox News will be covering every angle of this story throughout the weekend. Follow me on Twitter at Ingram Angle. Everybody have a great weekend. See you Monday.